We're going to finish out this caregiver series talking about the term of caregiver and thoughts and feelings about that. So part of this project has been to look back at our history in this PTSD journey and try to see myself as a caregiver through that. It is still hard for me to identify. I can see myself as a caregiver of our children, but I don't see myself doing a great job of being a caregiver for Brian. Caregiver is most often defined in terms of someone caring for the daily needs of another person, as for like children, elderly, or chronically ill people. And Brian would often tell me he needed my help to deal with the overwhelm or anger and other emotions. I didn't know how. I could be present, but I felt frozen. I didn't know what to say or do, and then when I did do something or say something, it was often not the right thing and caused more problems. So during the years prior to his diagnosis, what I was able to provide was regular healthy meals, a stable job and income, managing the finances, managing our calendar and schedules, grocery shopping, helping the kids with their needs, basically managing the household, other than, car and home repairs and maintenance and most of the yard work Brian took care of. But that is also caregiving, just not necessarily in the normal definition. I do believe that when Brian first used the term caregiver for me, there was a shift in our relationship. He recognized that he needed and received care from me. Therefore, he seemed more willing to accept and listen. It also gave me a different perspective and a little more confidence when having to provide care when he was struggling. I think it is important for both to accept their roles, me as a caregiver and Brian as the one being cared for. Without this recognition of roles, your caregiving work may be less effective if the one needing care doesn't accept the help or recognize it for care. For many years, I steered clear of more decisive actions because I didn't want to be told, "You're not my mom," or to be seen as a nag or anything like that. And so until that recognition happened, I don't think we were able to be as effective. I read an analogy about caregiving that said to think of healthcare as a three-legged stool. Family caregivers, so people like myself, serve as one leg of the stool. Professional caregivers, doctors, nurses, act as another, and the care recipient is the third leg. Without all three legs, healthcare cannot be as effective as it needs to be. I think that's a good way to look at that. And while I didn't understand my role as a caregiver for many years, the fact was that I was doing the work of a caregiver just without that title. And I just figured it was part of life. But it has taken a toll on me, and I have been struggling with many of the common challenges indicated for caregivers. By not having that title or a label, sometimes people consider it a label, I didn't see the potential problems that I might fall into, and I couldn't do anything about it. Some of the common problems for caregivers are caregiver stress, burnout, and if the work involves prolonged exposure to someone else's trauma, this can become compassion fatigue. And the symptoms of that include exhaustion, disrupted sleep, anxiety, headaches, stomach upset, irritability, numbness, a decreased sense of purpose, emotional disconnection, and problems with personal relationships. Caregivers are more likely to be depressed and secretly self-medicate. Caregivers often forget to care for themselves or make a plan to maintain their own health. Now, society applauds people who work themselves to death, who neglect their own self-care to help others. We rarely applaud people who are taking the day off, and it's really easy to view self-care as selfish. I definitely bought into all of that. Compassion fatigue really jumped out at me as I was reading about caregivers, and I found that I identified with many of those symptoms that I listed previously. But most articles discuss compassion fatigue in reference to professionals, so therapists, doctors, emergency responders. But dealing with a spouse's trauma regularly does affect family caregivers. I got to the end of my rope about 2 years ago, and I was super irritable, physically and emotionally exhausted, and I was resentful, just to name a few of those symptoms. I was on medication for a time for dysthymia, which is a milder but longer lasting form of depression. But after reading about compassion fatigue, I think that that's actually a better fit for what was going on, but they do look very similar. The key to avoiding compassion fatigue is balancing the needs of the family and self. That means self-care, boundaries, and having a community to lean on. Now, through therapy and a better understanding of all of this, as well as better communication with Brian, we're working on this so that I can get better at all of those things. I want to bring up one other idea that I think is important and is felt by many caregivers, but not really discussed. And there is this idea called the Caregiver Bind. And this is a new term to me, but I did find that I related to it. Caregivers can have a negative caregiving identity, and this can stem from this caregiver bind, where caregivers conceal the demands of caregiving to protect the care receiver's identity. So by concealing the extent of informal caregiving, there is an unintended consequence of making their caregiving non-existent or invisible. So let's try to break that down a little bit to make it a little less confusing. There is a shared goal in the care relationship for the care receiver to be independent. But they do need help. But they don't want the identity of needing help. They're trying to avoid stigmas. So caregivers ease that tension by concealing the work that they're doing caring for someone. This successful concealment from care receivers and family and friends might explain why caregivers view themselves more negatively than their partners view them. This undermines the caregiver's identity in two ways. The care receiver will underestimate the physical and emotional drain on the caregiver, which will lead to failing to provide the caregiver with social recognition. So, if asked if I thought Brian thinks I am supportive, I would probably say, I should hope so, which indicates the need for some recognition for my efforts. But this desire for social recognition conflicts with my efforts to conceal the demand of caregiving. So the second part of undermining the caregiver's identity is by successfully concealing the demands of caregiving, that will lead to the care receiver to overestimate the independence of themselves. And thus any involvement of the caregiver can lead to accusations of being overprotective. So to make this personal again, I would get frustrated at times and would say things like, I do all these things to make life manageable and you don't appreciate it. You don't understand. It doesn't matter. Brian wasn't aware of this laundry list of things that I would keep tabs on and try to control situations so that he wouldn't get upset or overwhelmed. And I was feeling unappreciated for all this work that I was hiding. So a few years ago, Brian asked me to stop saving him from the world, is how he would put it, so that he could better gauge his progress and identify where he still had work to do without me interfering and trying to control things. I think this caregiver bind is prevalent for spouses and partners dealing with PTSD. You make up excuses for why you can't go to this event, or you limit things that your family can do to protect the survivor from something that might be hard or overwhelming. The caregiver takes all of this on, and after a while it can wear on their feelings of worth and identity. So it helps to have a community that understands, that you can be honest with, and can give you some kudos for your hard work, but to also, when you're having a hard time, say, it's all right, we're just having one of those days, and your community understands and says, no problem. It also is good to remind caregivers that we put ourselves in this position, in the caregiver bind. And this awareness can help us avoid that negative identity about ourselves. I hope some of this information helps. This is the end of our caregiver series. I appreciate you hearing our story, my story. It's been hard to share this, but it's been good work. It's helped us, for me to say some of the stuff out loud, and for us to process that. At this point, I'm ready for a bit of a break. I'm exhausted. It's been a lot of work bringing all this up. But I want to say thank you to all of you that watched, and to Brian for allowing me this space on his channel, and also being the cameraman and editing and all of the hard work that's involved in that. I hope this series helped you. Let us know in the comments, or share with someone who you think might benefit from this information. Just want you to know you're not alone.